General Hospital spoilers for Friday, June 27th reveal that Anna is standing at the edge of a moral and professional precipice, and with every pointed question Jason throws her way, the ground beneath her grows more unstable. Once seen as unshakable in her resolve, Anna now finds herself entangled in something far more compromising than she ever anticipated, her increasingly conflicted involvement with Dalton. What began as a covert operation driven by duty has mutated into a complex emotional entanglement, one that Jason is beginning to see through with disturbing clarity. His questions are no longer casual inquiries about mission progress. They're interrogations. Sharp, unrelenting, and laced with a growing suspicion that Anna is no longer capable of separating her judgment from her feelings. Each time he asks why she delayed a move, withheld intelligence, or deflected a direct order, Anna falters. Not outwardly. But inside, the cracks are forming. Because Jason isn't just pushing her for answers, he's forcing her to confront a truth she's been desperately trying to suppress, that her connection to Dalton has compromised her objectivity, and perhaps even her allegiance. These confrontations with Jason are not mere disagreements, they are battlefield confrontations wrapped in quiet words. His eyes search hers for loyalty, for logic, for the unwavering precision he's always counted on. But Anna's gaze is heavier now, clouded by regret, by the ghosts of decisions that were once clear and are now murky. She tries to defend her choices, tries to explain that her instincts are still intact, that she's still playing the long game. But Jason sees the hesitation, the delays, the unspoken protection she offers Dalton again and again. And in his silence, in the way he clenches his jaw and doesn't answer, Anna hears what he's not saying, that he's losing faith in her. And the worst part? She's beginning to lose faith in herself. She knows that something is unraveling. That Dalton's grip on her, whether emotional, psychological, or strategic, has become a variable she can no longer ignore. And with Jason growing more aggressive, more convinced that the mission has been compromised, Anna finds herself caught between the man who once fought beside her without question and the one who now holds her fate in a web of manipulation. The pressure is becoming unbearable. Each decision feels like betrayal. Each silence feels like complicity. And Anna, for all her years of training and strength, is beginning to realize that the war she's fighting isn't just against Dalton, it's within herself. And Jason's questions are no longer just about protocol. They're about trust. And that trust is hanging by a thread. Jason and Carly have always shared a bond that defied logic. Something deeper than friendship, stronger than blood, forged through years of loss, loyalty, and countless battles fought side by side. But as they find themselves slipping into moments of reflection, revisiting memories of a time when trust was unshakable and survival meant moving as one, the present casts a far more ominous shadow. Carly, ever defiant and drawn to danger like a moth to flame, has become entangled in something far more treacherous than either of them anticipated. Her dealings with Brennan. What began as a calculated dance of negotiation and leverage has spiraled into a high-risk entanglement that now threatens to destroy everything she's tried to protect. And Jason, watching from the edges, can feel the storm tightening around her. It's no longer a matter of if the danger will come, it's how fast, how violently, and how deeply it will strike. Brennan isn't just another adversary. He's a man who understands leverage, who operates in the gray between government secrets and criminal underworlds, and whose interest in Carly has nothing to do with affection and everything to do with control. Jason sees it, in the way Brennan speaks to her, in the way he corners her with veiled threats wrapped in charm, in the way Carly, despite her strength, underestimates just how deeply she's stepped into something that's devouring her inch by inch. Jason's instincts are screaming, the same way they did in darker days when he would put himself between Carly and whatever danger she refused to see. But this time is different. This time, the stakes are higher, more shadowed, and rooted in a world even he can't fully predict. The more involved Carly becomes with Brennan's network, the deals, the quiet meetings, the whispered promises, the more Jason finds himself haunted by the past. Not just because he remembers what it was like to protect her, but because he knows what it cost him every time she refused to walk away. He remembers the nights he had to cover her tracks, the times he took the fall so she could survive. And now, watching her stand on the edge again, He feels that same old fire, the fear, the rage, the unspoken desperation to pull her back before it's too late. Only now, they're not just up against a rival family or a vengeful mobster. They're up against a system of secrets, manipulation, and blackmail so deeply embedded, it could swallow them whole. Carly brushes off his warnings. She insists she's handling it, that Brennan needs her as much as she needs to navigate his world. But Jason knows better. He sees the signs, the sleeplessness, the hesitation, the quiet glances over her shoulder. And it's driving him toward a breaking point. He's not just worried for her safety. He's obsessed with the idea that he might not get to her in time. That this time, her pride might be the very thing that breaks her. And in that fear, Jason finds himself spiraling into old patterns, checking her movements, analyzing her conversations, preparing contingency plans she doesn't even know exist. This obsession is beginning to consume him. He doesn't trust Brennan. He doesn't trust the government forces behind Brennan. And he certainly doesn't trust the silence surrounding Carly's sudden access to high-level information and influence. Something is wrong. Something is building. And Jason knows that when it explodes, Carly will be at the center of it, a target disguised as a player. He wants to pull her out, wants to drag her back to safety, but the very thing that makes Carly who she is, her independence, her fire, is also what keeps her from seeing the trap closing in around her. And so, Jason waits. Watches. Plans. Because he knows Brennan isn't done. And neither is Carly. And when the breaking point comes, when the consequences catch up, when the lines blur so completely that even Carly can't tell what's right anymore, he'll have to decide how far he's willing to go to save her. Again. What they're facing now isn't just a threat. It's an echo of everything they've ever fought against: manipulation, power, betrayal. But this time, it's more personal, more invasive, more entangled in the ghosts they never buried. And as Jason finds himself drawn deeper into the storm, haunted by what he might lose, one thing becomes clear: this isn't just about stopping Brennan. It's about saving Carly, not just from Brennan, but from herself. And that may be the most impossible mission Jason has ever faced. Brooke Lynn and Chase never imagined that the truth about Joe's identity, a revelation so deeply rooted in the past and sealed with silence, would unravel the delicate bond they had worked so hard to build. For months, they had tried to move forward, to build a future grounded in love, forgiveness, and a shared vision of stability. But once it was confirmed that Gio was not just a troubled teen with a musical gift, but the biological son Brooke Lynn had once given up and Dante had unknowingly fathered, everything changed. The room that once felt like home to both of them was suddenly filled with ghosts, of secrets kept, choices unspoken, and sacrifices that could no longer be ignored. And now, what was once a relationship filled with laughter and second chances is spiraling into emotional detachment, awkward silences, and bitter realizations that are breaking both of them apart piece by piece. For Chase, the sting lies not just in the truth, but in how it was handled. He doesn't fault Brooke Lynn for having a past. He's no stranger to pain, loss, or difficult choices. But the fact that this secret was buried for so long, that she couldn't trust him with the weight of it, has left a crack in his heart that he can't ignore. Every time he looks at Gio now, he sees not just a young man trying to find his place in the world, but a living reminder of the part of Brooke Lynn's life he was never allowed into. It's not jealousy, it's exclusion. And the more he tries to tell himself it doesn't matter, the more that exclusion eats away at his faith in the future they were building. Brooke Lynn, for her part, is consumed by guilt, but also by fear, the fear that this one truth, this one buried piece of her soul, is going to cost her everything. She had thought keeping the secret would protect everyone: Gio, Dante, Chase, herself. But now, the emotional backlash is undeniable. Chase is growing colder, less open. Their late-night conversations have turned into quiet dinners where neither one speaks. And worse, Gio, though grateful for the truth, is now acting out in ways that suggest he's just as torn by the revelation. She can see it in his eyes: confusion, anger, a desperate hunger for answers she can't always give. And in the middle of it all, Brooke Lynn feels herself unraveling, haunted by the choice she made years ago, and terrified that the love she finally found is slipping through her fingers. But what makes everything more volatile is the obsession that has begun to bloom in the aftermath of the truth, not from Brooke Lynn or Chase, but from the storm building around them. Media whispers, legal questions, and family pressure are all tightening the noose. Valentine has shown interest. Tracy is monitoring the situation. Even Sonny has begun asking questions about how this revelation might affect Dante's position, Joe's safety, and the potential for outside manipulation. Brooke Lynn can feel the world watching, waiting for her to stumble, and it's creating a level of psychological pressure that she is barely holding together. And through it all, Chase is beginning to retreat. Not out of malice, but self-preservation. He loves Brooke Lynn, that much hasn't changed. But he's starting to question whether love alone is enough when trust has been compromised. He doesn't know how to talk to her anymore without seeing the part of her life he never knew, the son she never told him about, and the cascading consequences of her silence. Every word between them feels heavier now, every touch hesitant. And slowly, the rift widens. The obsession isn't just in the emotional damage, it's in the way both of them are starting to lose themselves in the fallout. Brooke Lynn is overcompensating, trying too hard to hold everyone together. Chase is withdrawing, working more, avoiding confrontation. Gio, caught in the center of it all, is pushing boundaries, challenging rules, testing how far he can go before someone truly sees him, not as a revelation, not as a mistake, but as a person. And so the storm brews quietly, invisibly, but relentlessly. Brooke Lynn and Chase are still standing beside each other, but the space between them has grown thick with doubt, regret, and unspoken pain. They're still together, technically. But emotionally, spiritually, they're drifting. The future they dreamed of, a wedding, a family, a stable home, now feels fragile, like glass under pressure. And unless something changes soon, unless they both stop running from the silence and start facing the truth head-on, the fracture between them may become permanent. Because the truth about Gio didn't just reveal a past mistake. It exposed every unhealed wound, every vulnerability, and every buried fear they never wanted to name. And now, that truth is no longer just a secret. It's an obsession, one that threatens to consume everything in its path. The christening of Daisy was meant to be a day of celebration, a day for redemption, family, and spiritual renewal. But instead, it became the day Sonny fell. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but physically and devastatingly collapsed in front of the entire town, igniting a wave of terror, confusion, and chaos that none of them would ever forget. For weeks, Sonny had tried to mask the subtle signs, the tremors in his hand, the brief moments of dizziness, the unexplained pressure building behind his eyes. He told himself it was nothing, stress, age, the weight of responsibility. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. He just didn't want anyone else to know. Especially not Carly. Especially not Jason. Especially not Michael. He had shown up at the church that morning dressed impeccably, composed as always. He kissed Daisy on the forehead with the tenderness of a father and godfather who understood the sanctity of the moment. He stood with Michael and Sasha in front of the altar, his presence grounding the event with the quiet authority he carried into every room. But even as the priest began the blessing, those closest to Sonny noticed something was off. His hand trembled slightly as he held Daisy. His eyes looked strained. His jaw clenched with the kind of tension that didn't belong in a sacred space. Carly, sitting in the front pew, caught the shift first. Jason, from his corner of the church, stood straighter. There was a collective intuition, a breath held for a beat too long. Then came the moment. The priest lifted the water, the words of baptism echoing gently through the stained glass sanctuary. And as the congregation bowed their heads, Sonny's knees buckled. His body swayed, eyes losing focus. And then, with a sickening, echoing thud, he collapsed to the floor in front of everyone. The gasps were immediate. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. And within seconds, the ceremony was forgotten. The room descended into chaos. Michael was the first to react, instinct overriding shock. He dropped to his knees beside his father, frantically calling his name. Sasha froze, her arms still wrapped around Daisy, her face pale as porcelain, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. Carly was already running, her heels echoing against the marble as she rushed to Sunny's side, tears in her eyes, horror in her voice. Jason moved swiftly and silently through the crowd, cutting through the panic with deadly focus. He had seen Sunny take hits before, bullets, betrayals, losses no man should bear. But this was different. This wasn't war. This wasn't a rival family making a move. This was something deeper. Something medical. Something personal. And it was happening in front of everyone. The ambulance arrived quickly, but time slowed as Sunny was lifted onto the stretcher, his face ghostly pale, his body lifeless. And as they wheeled him out, the church once filled with music and holy vows now felt hollow, haunted. Sasha couldn't stop shaking. She held Daisy closer, whispering prayers that came out more like sobs. Michael stood frozen at the baptismal font, staring at the trail of blood left behind. A dark red line marring what was supposed to be the beginning of his daughter's spiritual life. And somewhere, out of view but not out of reach, Brennan watched from a distance. Calm. Observing. Almost as if he had expected it. In the hours that followed, everything unraveled. At the hospital, doctors scrambled to stabilize Sunny. The initial reports were inconclusive, a possible stroke, cardiac arrest, or worse, the result of foul play. Jason didn't wait for confirmation. He started making calls, tracing Sunny's movements over the last week, reviewing every meeting, every bite of food, every glass of bourbon. Something didn't feel right. This wasn't a random medical event. Not with the timing. Not with the growing pressure Sunny had been under. And not with Brennan's recent, quiet escalation of influence in Port Charles. Back at the house, Sasha couldn't stop crying. The image of Sunny lying unconscious on the floor kept replaying in her mind. She felt responsible. She had pushed for the christening to be a public affair, a big event, a statement of unity and faith. Now it had become a symbol of something else entirely, the moment everything changed. Michael tried to hold her, tried to reassure her, but he too was unraveling. His complicated history with Sunny made everything worse. He was angry. At Sunny for hiding the symptoms, at himself for not seeing them sooner, and at the situation for robbing Daisy of a moment that should have been pure. And beneath it all, a terrifying thought began to grow. If Sunny, the anchor, the protector, the immovable force that held them all together, could fall like this, what did it mean for the rest of them? What would happen to the family? To the organization? To the fragile balance of power in a town that had already endured too much? Jason, meanwhile, was already operating in survival mode. He didn't say much. He didn't cry. But the fire in his eyes had returned, a familiar, dangerous calm that always came before he made his move. He wasn't just worried about Sunny's condition. He was terrified of what Sunny's fall symbolized. The vulnerability. The opening. The opportunity for enemies to strike. And he knew exactly where to look, Brennan. The timing was too perfect. The tension between Brennan and Sunny had been growing beneath the surface for weeks, and now, with Sunny down, Brennan had an opening, politically, emotionally, and strategically. Jason's obsession with protecting Sunny turned to something darker, the need to avenge. To understand. To stop whatever this was before it tore everything apart. But even as he focused on the enemy, a different fear gnawed at him, Carly. She hadn't said much since the incident. She sat beside Sunny's hospital bed for hours, barely moving, barely blinking. Jason knew that look. It wasn't grief. It was calculation, and fear. Carly was preparing for the worst. And if Sunny didn't wake up, the war that would follow might not just be external. It could come from within. The christening of Daisy, a day meant to bind generations together under one name, had instead shattered the illusion of safety that Sunny had spent decades building. And now, Sasha and Michael, both already battling their own inner demons, were reeling under the weight of another trauma. Jason, already carrying more than he should, was preparing to go to war. And Carly, hardened by loss but still so deeply vulnerable, was bracing herself for a storm she couldn't stop. Because Sunny didn't just collapse that day. A legacy did. And what rises from its ashes, vengeance, grief, or redemption, will depend entirely on who can survive the coming fire.